Well, hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Making Lean Fly podcast. And this one is following on actually from some discussions we had in the previous podcast around daily management and problem solving. But this time we're going to talk specifically about a methodology for problem solving, which in my opinion is used far too little across most companies. And that's A3 problem solving. The guests I've got with me today are three people very well versed in using A3 problem solving, with different backgrounds, different industry experiences, but all seeing the power of using A3 problem solving to be an effective problem solver. That's Edwin Berg, Marc Davidson, and Rob Etheridge, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves properly in a moment. But the abstract for this episode is around the fact that A3 problem solving is an underused methodology in most organisations, yet can make problem solving highly effective, as well as much simpler and easier to communicate. However, there does appear to be an element of fear and a belief that it takes too long to solve problems using this approach. And so the purpose of this episode is to debunk some of the myths around it. So I'm your host, Philip Holt, but I do really want to focus on the people that matter. That's my guest today. So first of all, brief introduction from yourself, Edwin, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Edwin van den Berg. It's not the first time that I'm appearing on the podcast, so thank you for having me again, Philip. On a day-to-day basis, I lead the Lean Academy for GK and Aerospace. And I've worked in lean and operations since the early 2000s. So that's for a while.
Great. Well, you must be very tired having done it for so long, Edwin. No, it's great. We've had you on a few episodes, but this is one that you're really, really set up well for, which is problem solving. One of the best problem solvers I know. Marc, what about yourself? Could you give a brief introduction, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Philip. Great to be back on. Really enjoyed the last podcast I was on training within industry. This one is so close to my heart. And because we have so many problems to solve, within GK and Aerospace, I'm happy to lead the Lean program for our business line Civil. 15 factories across the globe that are all on their own journeys of improvement. I've had quite a journey as well. I think also starting around the early 2000s as Edwin did. Mainly been around in logistics, but also a few years in consulting with the Lean Institute, and that's actually where I picked up on this topic. And I've enjoyed it ever since.
Brilliant. No, it's great to have you on board, Marc. And I always love the approach you take to problem solving. I really resonates with me, the mindset that you have. A problem's a positive thing. It's something that we can get our arms around, solve, and then we're a lot better once we've done it. And I know you'll probably talk a bit about that as we go through the episode. And then finally, last but not least, Rob Etheridge. Rob, do you want to give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Thank you for having me back on the podcast. So my name's Rob Etheridge. I've been working for GKN now for nearly 4 years. I'm the global business line for defence, the Lean expert, and focusing on a few sites in the UK, in Luton and Cowes. I worked with Marc in Civil as well in the first sort of 2 or 3 years. Working again in Bristol and Turkey. So looking forward to talking about problem solving with the A3 template.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, and it's I know you've used this extensively, A3 problem solving. So great to get your insights as well. And you've mentioned something which I think is really quite interesting straight away to address, which is why do we call it A3 problem solving, Edwin?
We call it A3 problem solving because one of the main things that we do is we summarize our problem solving efforts on an A3 piece of paper. It's the size of the piece of paper, and it was chosen in the early beginnings of practical problem solving as done by Toyota because it's the carrier of information that you could, the largest size that you could send across the world using a faxing machine. So that's really a long time ago, but it has a really positive benefit to it. It makes for the need to summarize your your problem solving in a very succinct way. And for that, you need to be very much on top of what it is that actually the content is that you're trying to communicate. So we call it A3 problem solving because of the carrier that we have, the tool that we use for communicating the status of the problem solving.
Great. So it's as simple as that then. It's nothing more than just the size of the paper that we traditionally use. And I guess, a lot of A3s nowadays aren't actually printed on A3 paper because a lot of the time it's electronic in terms of how we create these and communicate them. But as you say, historically, pre-email, it was about faxing it when people were at a distance. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's an interesting piece of history there, Edwin. Thank you. And we'll talk about, what is A3 problem solving. I'm going to, for those watching the video cast in a moment, I'll put up a copy of an A3 template on the screen because that might help people who are watching this. But people who are listening will try and be as descriptive as we possibly can. But Marc, what is A3 problem solving?
Well, I had a bit of a laugh just yet as you said, yeah, it sounds so simple. It's just on a piece of paper. And to me, it is exactly to Edwin's point. Well, you got to leave a lot of stuff out because you only have that A3. So it's quite deceptively simple to really do a lot of what we call 5S of information to trim down the message. But if you look at the problem solving part of it, it is really an engaging way to tell the whole story and to really trim it down to what's really, really needed. And that makes it so effective because it really evokes what I also call A3 thinking, right? There's just a few words. And as you put it across to somebody, you get the immediate feedback. Hey, are the lights on? Are we with each other? Do we understand each other? And that is so valuable in problem solving that you really can liaise quickly on good facts and good insights and go through all the stages of cracking what is typically a tough problem, right? We don't know the solution just yet. We tried a few things. It doesn't work instantly or there are multiple factors. So, that's typically when an A3 comes in. So wait a minute, let's step back. Let's just trim it down. What are we really talking about? What do we have at hand? And how do we take this step by step to a solution? To me, that's all what A3 problem solving, A3 thinking is about.
Yeah, that's superb. I really like that, Marc. And I've put a copy of the A3 up for people who are watching on the video cast. But for those who aren't, there's basically eight steps here. I'll describe them as vividly as I can. So the first one is around the problem definition, and I'm going to come back to that because I think the problem definition is a absolutely critical part of A3 problem solving. Once we've done the problem definition, we want to break down the problem. Then we want to go to the third step, which is target setting. So what's the target we're trying to actually achieve? The fourth part is when we get into root cause analysis. So a lot of the time we'll use an Ishikawa, and even though we want to stay as succinct as possible, quite often we will go off the A3 to do the Ishikawa and then summarize the root causes back on the A3 afterwards. Fifth part, we're going to develop countermeasures. Those should directly address the root causes that we found in section 4. And then on the sixth section, equally as important, is we need to see those countermeasures through. I've often seen A3 problem solving where people come up with great countermeasures, but they never get implemented. So following them through and making sure that we see them through is really important. And then, of course, we need to evaluate the results and the process. So we want to see, did we get the right results and how did the process work? And then finally, once we've made an improvement and we've solved the problem, we want to standardize that success. So we need to update the new standards, whether those be work instructions, SOPs, whatever the standard is. Let's ensure that that's now in place. We train people so that we now work in the new way. So, hopefully people who are listening are familiar with at least those steps of problem solving. But if you're not, take a look, Google an A3, you'll soon see this. So, Rob, I've just tried to do that description, but I said I wanted to come back to problem definition. I've said it's very important. Could you describe a bit more why problem definition is so important?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Problem definition, is critical to understanding the problem at hand. If you get the problem definition wrong, and in a second I'll go into how we can really understand how we can define the problem better and get better clarity. But if you get that wrong, it can set you down a pathway that leads you to thinking about putting in countermeasures that aren't really going to impact your business or impact your the situation or the concern that you've got. So when we're looking at the problem definition and we're trying to gain that clarity, we're really trying to understand and at this point, this is one of the key mistakes. People try and do this in isolation. They try and do it in a room. They try and do it around a round table and go, right, we'll solve this problem. And there might be one or two people. It's critical at this point that you get the right stakeholders involved. You get the team, a cross-functional team together to really understand what is the problem we're trying to solve. You get that sort of brief statement, hey, we're delivery is at 50%. You go, oh, great. Okay, delivery's at 50%. Well, where is that a problem? And who is it a problem for? When is it a problem? Is it day shift? Is it night shift? Is it, is it in the first quarter? Was it in the second quarter? All of that sort of information needs to come in. And then why is it a problem? Why is it a problem for the organization? If we did nothing right now, why would it be a problem to us? Why do we want to invest time in going down this path? And then how much of a problem is it? So we really try to define and understand. And at this point, you can do, we've got a acronym called TAGS, where you can look at the trend. You can understand, is it something that's progressively getting worse? Is it something that's plateaued? Or is it something that's actually on its way? It's getting better, but still we need to problem solve this. Once you understand that trend, you understand what the actual current state is. What was the current state performance? And then we're looking at the gap. What the gap is to where we want to be. Okay, and therefore you get to the S, which is the standard. So at this point, you're really gaining a good picture in one sentence or one box there, where you can understand what the problem is and how big that problem is, and why should we go forward and solve this problem.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And again, good reason why I brought you onto this one, because I was hoping that we could get a really good explanation of the problem definition, and that was fantastic. You really nailed that. And it's just so important. We sometimes call this the 5 W's and 1 H. However, it can be confusing for people because they get that confused with 5 times Y. So this is different. This is the 5 W's and 1 H. So just to reiterate what Rob said, what is the problem? Where is it a problem? Who is it a problem for? When does the problem occur? Why is it a problem for the organisation? And how much of a problem is it? And that final one, that how much of a problem is it, is absolutely critical, isn't it, Rob? Because, as you say, you can spend a lot of time trying to solve a problem that's perceived to be a problem, particularly risky if it's a senior leader who perceives it as a problem. But it can cause a lot of people to spend a lot of time on something that's actually not one of your highest priority problems to solve.
Absolutely. Getting that initial how much of a problem it is, and sometimes you get a little bit at this point, knowing how much of a problem it is and putting some quantifying data around that. But the next step, and we'll probably get to this in a second, of breaking down the problem really helps with that. And if we just use an example, we can start going down it through when we break it down. But if we start looking at how much of a problem is it, if we were looking at delivery, for example, and we're saying we want to be at 95% on-time delivery in full to the customer, and we're actually delivering at 80%, for example, that there's a gap of 15%. That's a big problem for us. But we don't know where that problem is. We don't know where that is within our factory, or within our, if Marc was looking at this, where is it within the business line? You work your way down through the different layers of the problem. So yeah, it's very critical to understand how much of a problem it is and where you go with that.
But to Philip's point, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. I've had cases where it just stopped here because we drilled it down, we built the picture literally, and we said, oh, wait a minute, yeah, actually not that big of a problem. Well, great, we can free up our capacity and do something else. But I think it's so fundamental, as you said, to really get that picture right, to also make it a picture, because the great part of solving a problem here comes in when it really gathers the team and everybody understands, oh, wow, indeed, this is important, right? You're over that hurdle of gaining that commitment and that buy-in across the team and the organization, that this is something that we need to work on. So I think that's where the statement half solved comes in, because you got everybody aligned.
Yeah, thanks, Marc. That's great addition there. So if we look at that second part, break down the problem, what do we mean by that, Edwin?
If you take a look at the overall problem, it might be very daunting and feel like it's too large to solve. But there's very often either a logical or a measurable impact that you can strip down and group and take a look at. Where is the impact really hurting, and where is it maybe present but not so bad, and in some areas it might even not be present at all. So when you take a closer look at what the problem actually entails, and you're able to categorize where it occurs and how much of the problem is in which area, it makes for what do we call the Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule, being something that you can use, stating if we only take a look at this small area where it occurs, but it has a huge effect, maybe with just a few actions, we can already impact quite a lot of this problem, and we can keep it to something that we can really action in the short term with little effort and a big result. Taking a look at breaking down the problem is therefore an essential step. If you skip that, it becomes very difficult to focus. It really helps to align your team, the people that you work with, on where to have the biggest impact to solving it.
Yeah, that's really sage advice. So I guess, a tangible example of that might be if as a business you know that your inventory level is too high, you could do an analysis to see across, let's say you've got 10 sites, to see which sites are the largest contributors to that problem. And it might be using the Pareto principle that you find that 2 of your sites have 80% of the inventory issue. So then you can target your problem solving on those 2 sites rather than trying to solve the problem across all 10 of those sites. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly what I meant. Very good example, Philip.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Edwin. Okay, then step 3, we talk about target settings. So, Marc, maybe you could, emphasize the importance of target setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I see this typically going wrong. That you see in the target setting, actually the objective of the A3, you see it back. Well, we've already said you don't have enough space, right? So you definitely don't want to repeat yourself. That's a waste of space and thought work. So when we're talking about the target setting, it's actually the result of what Edwin just mentioned of breaking down the problem. Where do we really need to target? And what is it exactly, if we look at the data where we break it down, or when we look at the process, what's our point of cause? Where do we need to intervene? And by combining that, you can really go for a specific target setting. So in your example, Philip, the inventory, you could say, okay, hey, we've trimmed it down and we see a cluster of problems with raw material in these 4 sites. Okay, but if we look at the process, it may actually be, a malfunction in our supply chain that, that we can prove that is actually generating the majority of the problem. So the target setting then would be, okay, in our supply chain location XYZ, we want to get from A to B. So you really become specific in your hypothesis as to what is the target that you're trying to achieve that will ultimately solve the problem, like Rob said, for instance, on your delivery. So that connection is so important because that's what drives your hypothesis going forward.
Yeah, that's real. I really like the example there, Marc, as well. So what we've said so far, and these are critical, And I guess this could actually be one of the reasons why we fail quite often with A3 problem solving, because we've not honed in and focused on what we're trying to actually do. So, the way you three have explained these steps, we really make sure the problem we're trying to solve is a valid one. We then make sure that we're focused on where we can have the largest impact on solving that problem. And then finally, we've made sure that actually we understand what will a solution look like, what is it we're trying to actually achieve through this problem solving, and how do we measure success or not. And I think if you've got those three components in place, the team can really make some ground in solving the problem. I guess if you've not done that well enough, this is going to be probably one of the key reasons why we don't have success enough with A3 problem solving.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Okay, brilliant. Right, before we go to the next step, we always try to do a little bit of a fun fact about yourself. So, Rob, I hope you thought about this, because we're really looking forward to hear a fun fact about yourself, another one after your previous one in the previous episode.
I have, and I was trying to link it to problem solving, to be honest with you. So as you know, in my past life, most of my childhood and going into sort of up to about 27 years old, I was playing ice hockey. It was a heavy part of my my life, and I was playing for the senior team, and I was playing in Romford, and I got hit from behind, and I went headfirst into the boards, and slightly lost consciousness at the time. But in a sport like that, you do get up and you skate off, and I was sitting down on the bench, and I was like, oh man, I don't feel good, and I was suddenly getting shooting pains all down my spine and in my back, and I was like, right, I'm done. So they called an ambulance, and as soon as they did that, I was in a collar. In an ice hockey player, you have got a lot of equipment on, right? And suddenly put a neck brace on you. So that in the minds of being in a factory or something, that was a pulling the hand on, stop, we're going to fix something, and that can be really uncomfortable, right? And at that moment, I was uncomfortable. I was lying there, with a brace on. Get the blue lights, really great. That's good fun. Getting all the blue lights, shooting through, getting to the Romford Hospital. And at this point, they want to do some tests. So they need to get some understanding of the data, what's going on with this person. Of course, I'm still in all my ice hockey equipment at this point, and they need a sample. So I'm having to try and do a sample, and then very kindly, a gentleman comes in with a green uniform on and says, would you like me to take that for you? And I was like, yeah, of course, I can't look up. I'm just like, yeah, okay, thank you. Anyway, a nurse comes in about 5 minutes later and said, have you done your sample so that we can do your tests and understand what the problem is and how we can help you? Yeah, you've already taken it. Well, no, we haven't. What color outfit? It was someone in green. Oh, that's the porter. He's probably taking it away for waste. And I'm like, oh, so there's me dehydrated in full outfit and garter, box, shorts, everything. And I had people in different cubicles in the hospital trying to help me go to the toilet in some way, singing songs. Raindrops keep falling on my head. We're singing in the rain. And there's people that have had car accidents, and they're all trying to think about this poor boy I was about 25, lying in a bed, trying to figure out how to go to the toilet. So there you go. There's an interesting fact for me. All about problem solving. They couldn't get the data, and in the end, I had a crushed kidney, which was causing me my pain. So.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds very much like lean thinking. You were trying to create flow. Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Rob. What about yourself, Marc? You've had plenty of time to think now. What can you regale us with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the example that Rob just gave, because it did remind me of a fun practice I had in problem solving myself. When typically you dig into a problem, you start on A3 thinking, and what is that aha moment? Well, I typically have those in the shower. In the morning, it's like suddenly it all becomes clear. And or you just think of a correlation or a breakdown or something to do. And it's actually a bit of a call out to the audience here, that I used to have a writable pad in the shower, a special paper and a special pencil that actually works while it's wet. And that was so brilliant. I used that all the time. And then, I could tear off the sheet, get dressed up and, go back and take this idea forward. I did that so many times. I actually was so sad that I ran out of paper, and I literally ever since I have not been able to find it again. But if somebody's got it, please let me know where you get it, and try it yourself. It's a brilliant way to capture those great ideas and those precious moments you have for yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I suspect Edwin could point us in the right direction for that. Being a diving instructor, he can probably show us where we can buy that from. But it's unfortunate, Mark, because if you're a lawyer or solicitor, you would be able to bill for that time in the shower. It's actually legal to bill for the thinking time, but unfortunately, we're not able to give you remuneration for that. Your shower musings will have to stay free of charge. Okay, but great, thank you very much. I'm not going to ask you, Edwin, this time. I think we'll let you off this time, but next time you're on, I'm going to expect another a new one from yourself. Okay, so listen, we're back to A3 problem solving now, and we're getting to the really interesting bit. Although we've established that the first 3 steps are absolutely crucial, but now we've got the problem defined, we've broken it down, and we know what our targets are. Edwin, how do we do the root cause analysis?
Well, for one, don't do it in an office. I think that is the most important thing. Go and see, if you can, and find where the problem is actually occurring. If you do the root cause analysis, people very often start with an Ishikawa diagram. That can definitely be done on the sideline of the line. And it's very helpful because it structures your mind, and it structures what I typically see as first level causes, or sometimes even symptoms that occur when you see the problem happening. The Ishikawa helps because it has predefined categories that we use for that. But then we need to take a look at what is really impactful and what may be something that we observe or that we think is happening, but actually doesn't have that much of an impact. So being on the shop floor, being on the Gemba, and being able to see it happen, gather some data around how often it happens can make a real big difference in choosing where you do your deep dive. And then the deep dive starts. And it starts by asking the question, why does it happen? Is this really a cause that if we action it, we will take away something that is at the root of this problem? Or is it something that is just a symptom or an in-between layer? If you can really go deep and really understand where in the process it is occurring, and you can really see that if that root cause is taken away, therefore the in-between happening steps are getting better, and in the end, your end result is getting better, that makes a huge difference. So one of the things about, and thank you for showing it on the screen here, Philip, the Ishikawa or the fishbone analysis that many people do is have their first levels in these categories called out on the fishbone. But it's called a fishbone for a reason, and all these lines in the fishbone, they're grades. And every grade has a smaller grade to it, and then a smaller grade. So your 5 times Y can actually be captured as part of your Ishikawa as well. Now, the interesting part then becomes, how do you know you have a root cause? How do you know that there's something that if you can countermeasure that it actually is going to have an impact? And with to answer that question, we've chosen to introduce the 5 times Y therefore. So when we think we're at root cause level, we can start thinking about what's the countermeasure that we can take against this potential root cause, and what happens then? If we take that countermeasure, will therefore the higher level cause go away? Will therefore the higher level cause of that go away? And in the end, will therefore your problem be impacted? And that way, you can really start thinking about what is impactful and what is a potential real root cause that we should be actioning as part of our countermeasure plan. And the other thing, obviously, is Gemba data. If you can actually go to the process, can observe what's going on, and if you can start counting or start measuring what's going on in that particular area in your process, then it makes for a very good analysis and a very thorough root cause countermeasure plan. So there's a lot to say for doing Ishikawa as a starting point only, but then take a 5 times Y approach, get your Gemba data, and do your therefores in stepping back through your 5 times Y tree to make it effective.
Great, thanks very much, Edwin. And again, for those people who are watching this on the video cast, there's a picture of a very simple Ishikawa or fishbone. If you're listening and you don't know what it is, obviously once you've finished driving, if you're driving and you're safe to do so, Google it and you'll see many examples of this. So Rob, we've talked through the first 4 steps, and before we jump to the next step, one thing that immediately springs to mind is this can take quite a bit of time, right, Rob? So, why do we need to take so much time doing this?
Well, just before we get onto that, I think this is actually a critical stage, the Ishikawa stage, the 4th bit, and it's an output of the first 3 steps. If you've done them wrong and you've gone down the wrong path, the Ishikawa can really throw you out, because you're starting to look at things that aren't relatable to the original problem statement or the true problem statement or the breakdown. People can start looking and going to Gemba in the day shift, when you actually broke it down, it's only happening on night shift. So it's very critical that at this point, the first 3 steps are very, very key to understand. How do you start throwing mud on the wall on this Ishikawa? And another challenge is people only put, what they really, really think is a cause, rather than throwing all the potential possible things that it could be. And they sort of eliminate those and go, well, I'm not going to say that. And actually they're nuggets. They're little things that maybe should have been said. And then you can explore them through the way that Edwin has said. So, yeah, apologies. I had to sort of put that onto the back of what Edwin was saying. But in terms of why it can take so long, it's because people don't have the data around them. They don't have the confidence and the competence to be able to run this. One reason I was thinking of this beforehand, a reason why, and Marc, you're the same here. Philip and Edwin, you are very, very good at problem solving. And Marc, you said it at the start, it's a way of thinking. If you look at this process, and it's a process, as a template to fill out, people will just go to a room and they'll methodically go through the template, and they'll use the template as a tool rather than it's a structured process. And the template's just a visual representation of the questions and everything you're asking. Now, you could actually go very, very quickly on the shop floor, understand the problem just by asking questions and scribbling down on a piece of paper the order of what you're saying, and actually get the same effect of having it on a template. People spend too much time trying to make the template look good rather than actually the context of what they're putting into the template. And that's what I find. They spend too much time with the template itself, thinking that they've got to make it look good. They've got to get really beautiful graphs and all of these things, and they've got to link it to Excel and create all these things. Now, that's great. But actually through the problem solving section, that actually can be very, very quick, very, very fast. I think the lead time on A3 problem resolution, which is different from problem solving can be very quick. It's the problem resolution that can be very long and very arduous, because people don't have the solutions around them to solve it. And then they suddenly become despondent and it gets left in the side, because to solve that problem, I need to have leadership commitment, or I've got to get some money. Capital has got to be involved. And suddenly it becomes complicated outside of the A3, outside of the problem solving. The complexities come within the other business processes and tools rather than the actual A3 process itself. And that's what I'm starting to see a lot of.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I think what you're touching on there, Rob, is one of the things that I try to coach people a lot, and that's externalization, isn't it? Where, look to other people to solve the problem instead of looking at what we can do to actually solve the problem. And Marc, I can see you smiling and nodding. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that stage 5 around developing countermeasures.
Yeah, it's all connected. That's the whole thing. And to Edwin's point of the therefores in that, to prove if you've come to the good root cause, there's two other elements to it. It's like, do we stay in our own control, right? Is this, what can we do? And if we can't, do we need to pull in other resources to really bring it down? And can we still, correlate cause and effect? So if you look at the target setting, which should be the head of the fish, right, with a number, does it still make sense? And that thought process can take quite long, but it's the jewel, I believe, to get to your countermeasures, because this is the part. I typically say you spend about 75% of the time on A3 problem solving on that left-hand side. Before you really drilled it down, you've learned so much that actually, your countermeasures become, well, I wouldn't say easy, but they become really logical for everybody to understand. And that's, the proof is there in the pudding. Actually, to Edwin's therefore case, right? You want to say, okay, root cause, what's the permanent countermeasure? Root cause, permanent countermeasure. Can we really bring those together? But do be mindful, because if you're talking about the countermeasures, you still need to prove them. So you think it may be right, it makes sense, but does it really solve the problem? Can we prove that going forward? And bringing that to the test is usually really a fantastic trial and error journey with the team. Although you've come to a point that most of them are probably right. And those countermeasures then, is when the fog is cleared, we know what to do, and we're really onto it and trying to prove it right to see if this is indeed the case.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. I love the way you described that, Marc. And again, it comes back to, the developing of the countermeasures is almost simple if we've got it right in the first place. And, one of the other tools, and maybe Edwin, you can talk a little bit about this when we're doing the analysis of the root cause and trying to really distinguish the priorities. There's something called a NOT analysis. KNOT, or Kilo, November, Oscar, Tango. So NOT analysis, know, need to know, opinion, or think we know. Could you perhaps talk a little bit more about how we use that, Edwin?
Absolutely. Because if you come to the stage that you have a number of potential root causes listed, or where you're looking for Gemba data, I think one of the things that we very often do is we jump to conclusions, thinking that we've got evidence, thinking that we know what's going on, maybe estimating how large the impact is going to be. If we force ourselves to basically, for all of these root causes, say, is that a K, an N, an O, or a T? So do we really know? Or do we need to know more? Is it perhaps based on opinion instead of fact? What do we think we know about this? We actually challenge ourselves to go one step deeper and really make it extremely tangible. So I've used the KNOT analysis, as I deliberately call it, very often to distinguish between those root causes that make a difference and those potential root causes that actually turn out not to have that much of an influence. And that really is a fantastic input for the development of countermeasures and a countermeasure plan. Because there also you have that same pitfall. Do we know really what the countermeasure is, or have we just stated an overall high-level action? Do we know who is going to take it? Do we know when the impact is going to be? Have we developed a plan that we can execute, that we can hold each other accountable for and say, this is who's going to do this by then, and this is what we expect the outcome to be? And if you go to that extra piece of information, an extra challenge with the KNOT analysis, you actually build a very, very thorough countermeasure plan.
Yeah, so it's definitely not something to ignore.
Absolutely.
Okay, so hopefully that'll stick in the memory of people as they think about the terrible joke. So developing countermeasures we've just talked about, and then the C countermeasures through, Rob. So we've had this great team that's come together, hopefully a team and not an individual, and they've come up with the great countermeasures based upon great problem solving. How do we make sure that we see the countermeasures through?
Yeah, I keep saying that every step is critical. Every step is critical, but this is a real key one of why A3 problem solving fails. Is we can come up with do the great problem solving, and we can come up with some really good countermeasures to implement, which are going to achieve our target. And at this point, we need a supporting system to be able to manage that A3. This may not be the only A3 problem solving that is going on in the business or in the site or in your team. You may have 2 or 3. And if you don't have the discipline and the leadership rigor in holding people accountable to the due dates of those countermeasures, supporting them, coaching them, have you got any risks in delivering on time? We need to have that leadership commitment and that discipline. So we try to make the A3s visible, or the actions visible. Now, a way that you can do that is to actually break some of these actions out of the A3 and put them through, as we have in GK and Aerospace, a Kaizen event planning process. Now, it might be that you are trying to roll out using 5S or using standard work or something like that to actually put in a solution to solve an issue. Now we need to manage that and control that and hold people accountable to those actions. So seeing them through is a very, very critical bit, because what happens is you can do all this great work, it's on a piece of paper and it sits on the back of someone's desk, or it's digital and it's on a file deep in the hard drive or the shared drive of the business, and everybody can forget about it. And sometimes, because the solutions are quite difficult to put in and quite, as I said before, it's quite easy to go, well, no one's asking me about it. It's okay. I'll just leave it there. And you forget about it. So we need to hold people accountable to the great work that gets done in the problem solving to make sure the problem resolution gets done.
Yeah, it comes back again. I say this quite often. If my boss is interested, I'm fascinated.
Yeah,
so we need a way of making sure that it's clear that there's an interest and an expectation that we deliver. Absolutely. So then I guess, maybe we take these last 2 steps together, Marc. We've got to evaluate the results and the process, and then we've got to standardize that success. Could you talk a little bit more about those 2?
Yeah, this is the proof of the pudding, as they say, right? Because through all these steps, we've really funneled down, we've drilled down to understand where the problem is, and what specific targets we are addressing that we think are most likely to solve our problem. We've broken it down, got to the root cause, got to the countermeasures, implemented them. Now what? Did we really solve the problem? So here, you really want to circle back to the tags, as the acronym that Rob talked about. Are we really closing the gap to our standard, and are we reaching our target on the metric that we started off with all the way back in defining the problem? So this is where you typically want to see a trend. We're talking about delivery performance, for instance. We saw it was under the target for quite a while, and we've done some interventions. And ideally, you want to check them against the timing of your countermeasures that you've seen through in your plan. We did this. Then it went up a few percent. We did something else and it went up a little more. We did something. Hey, it fell down again. This is where you start to check your results to see if your hypothesis really hold, and are really working out to solve the problem that we started the A3 on in the first place. And typically when this is the most fun of the learning journey, this is where you also see, what really sticks. And obviously you want to keep that. And that's where the last part comes in. You want to standardize that success. We've delved into this problem with the objective to make sure it never happens again. So in terms of standardizing success, we have to often think a little further. So if we project this into the future, we've seen our trend going down, we're now hitting our targets. So, okay, think ahead. Now, is there an opportunity or a moment in time that it may come back? In what conditions? Oh, wait a minute. When we've got new staff coming in, for instance, how do we make sure that they're trained to the standard as well? Or maybe there's an external event that we may need to prepare for it to safeguard the results that we now have. So those are all things that you really need to consider to standardize the success and make sure it's sustainable for the future. And lastly, what I want to add to that, typically you want to share those learnings and really talk it through. Think, where else could this problem occur? And from a problem point of view, or Yokoten as it's called, could we initiate some problem solving in areas where we have a similar problem? We have a lot of 5-axis fantastic machines across the business in multiple sites. So a problem that occurred on one may also be a problem somewhere else. So we inspire others to read through our A3, which by that time typically just takes a few minutes because we've drilled down all the essential information. And we can really inspire others to say, hey, is this something that we should pursue or maybe investigate for ourselves as well?
That's excellent, Marc. And you even gave us an extra one there where you talked about knowledge sharing in Yokoten. So thank you. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Absolutely. So Rob, if we talk about a couple of things that should happen after this, Marc's already talked about Yokoten. What about Hansai in the bottom left-hand corner of our standard in the GK Aerospace A3? We talk about Hansai. What's the benefit of that?
Yeah, and this sort of goes a little bit to what Marc was saying. It's after you've gone through the whole problem solving, and after you've implemented the solutions, it's really good to sort of take a step back, put your feet up and sort of go, how good was that? How was that experience of going through the problem solving? Did we do it as fast as we could? Could we learn from the process of problem solving and the process of problem resolution? Can we learn from that so that our next problem that we need to solve, we can actually solve it quicker, faster, more effective? You might go through a problem solving solution and realize that halfway through that you haven't got the right stakeholders, and realize that you've tried to do something that impacts your internal and external customers and suppliers, and you realize that you've made an issue there, and you go, and you've got to navigate your way through that and do some stakeholder management and maybe apologize. We didn't realize we were going to affect you. So afterwards, having that hindsight time, having that reflection time to understand how you can improve your problem solving skills as a team and as an individual, if you're the one that's sort of taking control of the A3 itself.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I really like the way you described that, Rob, about the Hansai. And again, what I like is it was very much in the spirit of Hansai. It's about self-reflection, looking inwards. What can I do better? Not what others can do better. So that's great. So we are coming towards the end of the show's time, but I do want to just cover one other thing, Edwin, which is to put it into the context of the problem solving, let's call it hierarchy. This isn't the only type of problem solving. So could you maybe elaborate a little bit on where does A3 fit in that hierarchy?
Take a look at the hierarchy that we use a lot in Lean. We start off with the straightforward problem solving of getting things back on track using a 3C approach, the concern, cause, and countermeasure approach. It's very often where you know what is causing the deviation, you know what the impact will be, and it's something that you could do with one or two people within a couple of hours with immediate effect. It's what we do in daily management. And in 80% of the cases, that should bring us where we need to be, back on track. If you have a bigger deviation or you don't get the result out of your 3C, that's where the A3 problem solving comes in. You team up with more people, you do more impactful analysis of what the problem really is about, what is causing it, and actually try to deep dive to root cause before you then, with your team, develop your countermeasure plan and see it through. And then finally, if that doesn't give you the result that you're after within, let's say, a week or two, then you must admit that it wasn't so easy to find the root cause and really understand it. And that's where we say that it's time for a Six Sigma project. It's time for a DMAIC approach that really has a large toolbox and a method to really investigate the different root causes that could occur in a more statistically and scientific approach. All of these three, by the way, are scientific approaches. They're all proven to be very valid, and each have its area of application. And A3 sits there in the middle for the bigger problems that you can't solve within a day or two with the known knowledge, and that needs that multiple disciplinary team to work together on resolution.
Excellent. No, thank you, Edwin. I think it's important that we kind of put it into context to ensure that the listeners really understand that it's not, the only tool we've got for problem solving. And as you quite rightly say, a lot of the time, simple 3C problem solving should get most of the day-to-day problems resolved quickly and easily. Yeah, great. Well, listen, I'd love to talk about this subject for a lot longer, but we are coming to the end of our allocated show time. And I'd really like to thank you, Marc, Rob, Edwin. Really fabulous answers, and really hopefully the listeners will have got a lot out of this. I certainly did. And so just leaves me to say to our listeners, thank you very much. And remember, it's about changing how you lead, not who you are.